Hey there, welcome to Cityline Online. We are so glad that you joined us today. During this time, we invite you to join us for engaging worship, listen to intentional teaching, and see how you can get connected. Let's get ready to celebrate.
Welcome, Cityline! We're here to praise the Lord this morning, and guess what? We're going to bring in some salsa praise today. So get your family together and sing with me. Te amo, I love you con todo mi corazón. Te amo, I love you con todo mi corazón. With all my heart, oh Señor, with all my soul, oh Señor, I love you, Lord. Te amo, I love you, Lord, I love you, Lord. Te amo, I love you, Lord, I love you. I love the way you never change, your word remains forever and ever. I love your name, Jesus the same, yesterday, today, forever and ever. Oh Lord, your love never fails us. Oh Lord, your love never fails. Te amo, I love you con todo mi corazón. Te amo, I love you con todo mi corazón. With all my heart, oh Señor, with all my soul, oh Señor, I love you, Lord. Te amo, I love you, Lord, I love you, Lord. Te amo, I love you, Lord, I love you. I love your grace that broke the chains of sin and shame forever and ever. I love your mercy, Lord, you are worthy of all the glory forever and ever. Oh Lord, your love never fails me. Oh Lord, your love never fails. I love you con todo mi corazón. Te amo, I love you con todo mi corazón. With all my heart, oh Señor, with all my soul, oh Señor, I love you, Lord. Oh, your love never fails me. Tell him that he never fails. Oh, your love never fails me. No nos falles, Señor. Oh, your love never fails me. Te amo, oh, your love never fails. Camino derechito con mi Cristo a mi lado, camino derechito con mi Cristo a mi lado. ¡Vamos! Oh, your love never fails. Camino derechito con mi Cristo a mi lado, camino derechito con mi Cristo a mi lado. ¡Vamos! Oh, your love never fails me. Te amo, oh, your love never fails me. That's right, Jesus. Oh, your love never fails. Oh, your love never fails me. Hallelujah. Give it praise. Give it praise.
Come on, let's continue to give God praise right there in your home. No matter the circumstance, we can trust in God's promises and rest in it. I want to encourage you to do that today as we worship and sing.
Father of kindness, you have poured out grace. You brought me out of darkness, you have filled me with peace. Giver of mercy, oh my help in time of need. Lord, I can't help but sing.
Come on, let's sing this together. He's faithful.
Faithful you are, faithful forever you will be, faithful you are, all your promises
promises are yes and amen.
All your promises.
All your promises are yes and amen.
Come on, church, let's make that declaration together. All his promises are yes and amen. He never leaves us, he never forsakes us. Come on, let's sing together.
Beautiful Savior, you have brought me near. You pulled me from the ashes, you have broken every curse. Blessed Redeemer, you have set this captive free. And Lord, I can't help but sing you faithful, faithful you are, faithful forever you will be, faithful you are.
All your promises are yes and amen.
Come on, let's declare that. Come on.
That all your promises are yes and amen. Faithful you are, faithful and forever you will be, faithful you are. All your promises, and all your promises are yes and amen.
Church, I just want to invite you, whatever your fear, whatever your worry is, let's not put our trust in what we can do, but let's put it in him today. Let's put our confidence in him. Would you believe that? You should declare this.
I will rest in your promises, and my confidence, it's in your faithfulness. And I will rest in your promises, my confidence, it's in your faithfulness. 'Cause I will rest in your promises, my confidence, it's in your faithfulness. 'Cause I will rest in your promises, my confidence, it's in your faithful, because it's faithful, faithful you are. Promises are yes and amen. He's faithful. Faithful you are. Yes, you are. Faithful and forever you will be. Faithful you are. All your promises, and all your promises are yes and amen. And every word that you say, promises are yes and amen. And we believe that. And all your promises are yes and amen. Thank you, Lord.
Hey, Cityline family and friends, we are so glad that you are tuning in with us on our online experience. My name is Jack, and I'm one of the pastors here at Cityline Church, and we're just glad that you are worshiping with us today. You know, we've been so blessed by the series Escape Room, so today we're going to wrap up with part 5, and I'm excited because I have another one of our licensed therapists hanging out with us, teaching with us, helping us to navigate through things like loss and grief. So do me a favor. Why don't you tag a couple friends? Why don't you share the feed? And let's continue to worship God together.
There's a table that you've prepared for me in the presence It's your body and the blood you shed for me. This is how I fight my battles. There's a table that you've prepared for me in the presence of my enemy. It's your body and the blood you shed for me. This is how I fight my battles. And I believe you've overcome it. I will lift my song of praise for all you've done. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. In the valley, I know that you're with me, and surely your goodness and mercy follow me. So my weapons are praise and thanksgiving. This is how I fight my battle. And I believe you've overcome it. I will lift my song of praise for all you've done. This is how I fight my battle. This is how I fight my battle. This is how I fight my battle. This is how. This is how I fight my battle. This is how I fight my battle. This is how I fight my battle. This is how. This is how I fight. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles.
Father, we thank you so much that we don't head into any battles alone. There's nothing that we face that you haven't already seen, that you haven't already been through, that you already haven't had victory over. So Lord, we lay down all our failed weapons, our weapons of shame, our weapons of defensiveness, our weapons of pride. We lay it all down and we armor up with your word, God, as we head into these battles, knowing full well and full confidence, Lord, that you have already been there. God, I thank you that your love surrounds us, your peace surrounds us, and even when we feel like we are in the middle of a battle, Lord, that there is nothing that we're in alone. And Lord, I just thank you so much for who you are and the victories that you've won. And we just say this all in your Son's mighty and powerful name we pray. Amen.
Hey Cityline Church, it is so good to worship with you online today. If you are new, we would love to get to know you. One of the ways you can do that is just by commenting in the chat, or you can join us after service at 1 o'clock every Sunday in our virtual lobby. It's at this point in the service when we want to give you the opportunity to practice living generously. If you're new with us, please don't feel obligated to give, because this service, it's our gift to you. But for those of you who call Cityline Church home, we just want to say thank you for your generosity, because it allows all of us to come together to help people discover and follow Jesus.
All right, so there you have it. CT, he's learning the power of prayer and apparently discovering that God can make a way out of no way as he continues to provide a way out, right? Huh, yeah. Wait, hold up. Oh, time out. Someone's at the door. Live recording. Sorry.
What are you doing? What? Dude, it's CT.
CT,
Dude, bro, where have you been? It's been like...
where have you been?
You've been... Dude,
It's been forever. Look.
I got nothing, dude.
Okay, hold on, time out. CT, we're teaching. Okay, we're right in the middle of teaching. I hear that they've reopened trails and hiking. Take a hike. All right.
Dude. We'll catch up later.
See ya.
Good luck. I don't know, dude.
It's good, man. It's like he's excited. I haven't seen him in a while, so you know.
It's definitely been a season.
Glad to have him back. All right. So, where were we? Well, there you have it. So apparently, CT has escaped his escape room, and he's pretty fired up about it. And we're excited for him too. I mean, the reality is that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the escape room. And many of you have probably experienced that, but the way that we're trying to experience it is asking the question, what do you do when you have no idea what to do? And you're going through a season where it feels like things have changed so much that you're almost in this escape room. For those of you who have never experienced a literal escape room, there was a time and a season when we were actually allowed to go hang out with friends and coworkers and be locked in a room together, all with the excitement around trying to escape, trying to solve the mystery, solve the puzzles, get the next clue to find freedom. But it's ironic that sometimes when we're in our life and we're feeling stuffed and overwhelmed and feeling like we're locked in, we tend to say, hey, wait, time out. This is not what I wanted. This is not what I need. And I did not sign up for this. So what do you do in that moment? I think when you track through a pandemic like you and I have been over these last few weeks, this thing that tends to get longer and longer, it feels so overwhelming that we just want to hurry up and get to the end of it. But that's our concern, is that we want to get to the final destination. We want to hurry up and get to the end of it and then miss out what we could be learning as we're walking through it. In fact, with the power of God at work in and through our life, we don't want to just react to the current situation that we're in. We want to learn how to respond to it. But here's what's fascinating that you may or may not know about escape rooms. See, escape rooms, sometimes you don't actually win the game. You don't actually escape. In other words, sometimes you lose in the escape room. Yeah. That sometimes there's this idea of us working against the clock with a set amount of time, trying to achieve this common goal, only to realize that at the end of things, we didn't make it. There's loss, and you have to sit in it. You have to sit with the disappointment. You have to sit in the frustration that you tried everything. You tried your best to control it. You tried to do everything that you could to make this thing work out, but in reality, you've lost. Now, I don't know if you're anything like me, but I've experienced loss in my life. Loss of all different kinds. I've experienced the loss of people. I've experienced the loss of things. But I'll never forget when I first experienced what it felt like to lose. I remember being a kid in Little League. I remember wanting to be on the all-star team so bad. And I remember I finally made it one year. I mean, literally, I just scooted in. I mean, I think it was just the coach just being kind, honestly. But I was so proud to be on that team. And we worked so hard all throughout the season. We worked so hard to practice for the teams that we're going to face. It was a 2-game elimination. And wouldn't you know it? My first experience in All-Stars, we were eliminated in 2 games, right? And I remember sitting on the bench after game 2, crying, weeping, sobbing, just overwhelmed. It wasn't the championship game. It was just the second game that we lost. But the feeling of loss was so real. Now, life doesn't always take the route that we expect. And life sometimes, unfortunately, doesn't always take the path of least resistance. And when it does, that brings change. And that's what we've been talking about. We've been talking about this idea of unexpected change brings both danger and it brings opportunity. It brings danger and it brings opportunity. But here's something that I want you to remember as we wrap up this week of Escape Room, this final week in this series. It's this, that we forget that change normally includes loss. Change normally includes loss. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And I'm excited because today I'm not going to talk about it alone. I'm actually here hanging out with our friend, your friend. You know her well. She's a licensed therapist. Her name is Susette Magaña. Susette, we're so excited to have you with us today. Glad you're hanging out with us.
I'm excited to be here, Pastor Jack. Hi, Cityline family.
Yeah. It's so good to be able to hang out together. I've asked Susette to just hang out with us today, and her and I are going to engage in a conversation that's all about navigating this idea of loss and grief. Loss and grief. Now, Susette, you mentioned that loss is just something that's just tends to be a part of life.
It's a normal part of life, yeah. And it's, whether we lose someone that we love deeply, someone passes away, expected or unexpected, or we just lose parts of life that we thought were a given. Mm-hmm. Like I thought I would get married. I thought I would have kids. I thought I would have this job or this career that I really wanted. And so expectations are part of loss, right? Yeah. Like as we expect things that we don't get, we have to identify that as loss.
Right. So loss tends to happen. And so here's my suggestion. Chances are is over the last 9 weeks, I would say every one of you watching today, wherever you're tuning in from, you've probably experienced some sort of loss of some kind. That as Susette mentioned, maybe it's a loss of some goals. Maybe it's a loss of something that you failed to achieve. It's the loss of a job. Maybe it's financial security. Maybe it's the loss of health, a breakup, academic failures. I mean, you name it. There's all kinds of things. But I would say even deeper than that, it's usually the loss of a dream. It's kind of this death of a dream, that we looked forward to something in the future. We looked forward to something that was ahead, and now suddenly that thing feels loss. That maybe it's the death of the dream of having a long and happy marriage. Maybe it's having a long and healthy life. Maybe it was the dream of retiring from a certain job, or the dream of finally owning your first home. Maybe it was the dream of finally starting that business that you've always wanted to start. And for others, it was just the dream vacation. It was the wedding ceremony. It was the honeymoon that you actually had planned, and things suddenly changed. And for others, it was the graduation that you feel like, if I'm honest, I worked so hard for my entire life to date for this moment of being celebrated for my achievements. And it's hard to grapple with. It feels like a season of loss. As we deal with loss, we're going to engage scripture today. And one scripture in particular is found in Ecclesiastes. It's written by a guy named Solomon. Solomon, he was a wise man, the wisest person ever. And he talks about observations, times, seasons. And this is something interesting what he says. He says, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. So he's helping us to understand that this is the way that life tends to work. And then I felt this was fitting for us in our season currently. He says there's a time to tear down and a time to build. Many of you know that even before this pandemic, we were in this building experience where we were tearing down something and we were building something back up. We were increasing the room. We were making room for those who aren't here yet. There's a time to tear down and a time to build. There's a time to weep and a time to laugh. He goes on and he says, there's a time to mourn and a time to dance. There's a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. And this one I thought was really fascinating. He says, there's a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, right? Like, isn't it true, Susette? Like, we're in this
very valid right now.
we're in this season right now where it's like, hey, no touching, right? Like no touching, no high fives, no handshakes, no hugs. And that's something that we so much desire. It's something that we've so been used to, and now things have changed. And again, every change that we experience includes some sort of loss. But here's what's interesting. Okay, most of the emotional stuff that we deal with, most of the emotions that run rampant in our life is the stuff that we tend to want to cover up or refuse to deal with, and it all revolves around some kind of loss. And I get it. Nobody wants to experience pain and suffering. Nobody wants to experience emotional trauma and daily trials. Nobody wants to wrestle with temptation and sin like we talked about last week. Most of us just want to skate around it or simply overlook it. But when it happens, right, when we experience it, unfortunately, that kind of response has left us not knowing exactly what to do with it. And so what we want to suggest today is this, that loss always needs to be grieved. That loss always needs to be grieved. Now, grief is an emotional and physical reaction to any traumatic or stressful loss. And what we want to talk about today is the process of working through loss that is known as the expression of grief. That no matter how great the loss, no matter how small the loss, no matter if you think it's significant, insignificant to you, the reality is it's a loss. And we want to learn how to process because unfortunately, we've not been given a good model. We've just kind of picked up things over the course of our life that we've just kind of seen around us. It's what we'll call common approaches to loss. Now, Susette, you and I talked about this, and you talked about what happens in this season, about this idea of like we tend to avoid expressing grief.
Yeah, it's really common for all of us, and as you said, from depending on what we learned growing up and from different backgrounds, to learn how to avoid acknowledging and expressing grief. But grieving is like breathing. Like we can hold it for a time, but it's a really natural process. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we just have to like exhale and let it take its natural process, Right. But we came up with a few things that that talk about what happens when we're holding our grief back, when we're right holding our breath.
When we don't want to engage, right? And one of those things is this idea of we stuff or avoid the feelings. Mm-hmm. So we have a feeling that we don't like, right? And some of us, we just grew up around this. It was something that like, it was role modeled for us by others, or maybe it was told to us that we just suppress it, or we push it down, or we just want to avoid it. But pretending that it didn't happen, that it's not there, isn't helpful. Is that
Or
correct?
that the feelings that come up as a result aren't natural and something that needs to be empathized with, right? Like
Right.
sometimes we have this feeling that comes up as a result of grief, and our parents or someone that's older than us tells us, knock that off.
Right.
Don't cry. Don't get angry. You're not supposed to cry. You're not supposed to get angry. Don't be out of
Yeah,
control.
stop it. Right.
Stop it.
Right, right. And so stopping it doesn't fix it, doesn't change it, doesn't process it, right? We bury those negative emotions, and those negative emotions tend to come back later in life. The other thing that we do is we replace or compensate for the loss. So we want to replace it, right? So the marriage ended in divorce, and your thought is, that's fine, there's more fish in the sea, right? I'm just going to go out, I'll just find the next best thing. I'm going to find, a better one, a prettier one, a wealthier one, whatever it is, right? You want to try to replace that with something else. But there's an idea of compensating for the loss, and this compensation leads us to this unhealthy habits that we've been talking about.
Yeah, often when we have grief feelings that we can't tolerate, or loss or trauma feelings that we can't tolerate, we can compensate for them in different ways to like calm our body down or calm our emotions down. And addiction is an amazing example of that. Like we smoke, we drink, we use something to calm down the natural feelings that are coming up because they're too scary to deal with.
Right. And because we're not dealing with it, really what we're doing is we're just numbing it, right? We're trying to drown it out. But that thing keeps coming back up for air.
Just keeps coming up bigger and stronger.
Yeah, it gets stronger every time. And then the other one that you hear commonly is time will heal all things, right? Like time's just going to heal. If I just give it enough time, or if we avoid it long enough, like somehow it's just going to go away. But time doesn't fix it, right? These things don't go away. We can only stuff things for so long until they, it's like this, just all over the place, right? It comes back out. And so we know this doesn't work. We know that it's unhealthy. We know that we've seen the effects of it all throughout our life. And what we need to understand is how we choose to handle loss. It matters, right? It matters to the quality of our life. Now, here's what we're trying to get you to understand early on. Listen, there is no life without change, okay? Change happens in life, right? There is no change without loss, and there is no loss without pain. Okay? Pain comes with loss. But understand this, grief, choosing to grieve, that's absolutely a choice. Now, when we go through loss, you tend to see two common approaches to grieving. One is we shrink back in fear, right? Or we actually lean in and begin to grieve. I want to be honest with you up front. Fear is not good. It's not how we're hardwired. It's not what we were created for. Grieving is something that we're actually invited to. Fear causes us to push away, avoid, pretend like things don't happen. I'm going to be strong enough to get over it. It lies to us and tells us that we're big enough and tough enough to handle it. But here's a reality that I need you to understand today. The longer we avoid engaging our grief, the greater the repercussions. The longer we tend to allow grief to just, the non-existence of grief, or to push away grief, the bigger, like Susette said, the bigger it gets, the stronger it gets, the more grand the repercussions. Now, when we talk about the repercussions, it's easy to look at things like our past pains, things that happen in our past. Like it's choosing this unprocessed grief that when we don't grieve, we tend to get stuck emotionally. And when we're stuck emotionally, stuff from your past, you tend to act out today. Isn't that true?
That's true. Yeah. And grief can get bigger, like the feelings can get bigger, or they can get tighter and deeper and sit in your gut like a knot if you're not someone that explodes, but you're someone that retreats.
Right. Absolutely. And so when we're talking through this process, what you don't grieve will not only affect you, but it'll ultimately affect those around you. And here's a big danger of avoiding this engagement with grief, is that when we run from grief, it can actually hinder our relationship with God. It can hinder our closeness with God. Now, I want to be very real with you in this moment, and I want to clarify some things because I've worked with a lot of people. I know Susette has worked with a lot of people, and I think this is a common theme that we see running throughout people. It's that sometimes we act as if we can't have both grief and faith. that we can't have them both at the same time, that whether it be maybe our church upbringing or our family dynamic or a cultural issue, whatever that might be, we just feel that we're told we've got to be tough, we've got to be strong, we've got to put on a right face, and we've just got to just move forward. And sometimes, right, shutting down grief feels kind of spiritual. It feels like, well, we're really leaning into God. And we tell ourselves and others, we'll just forget the past and we'll just press on. Or that, I don't know why this happened, but I'm sure God's got a plan. And we'll even quote a few scriptures, right? Like, God works all things out for the good of those who love him, called according to his purpose. Yes, we absolutely believe that to be true. But in a moment of loss and in the moment when we're supposed to be engaging grief, sometimes you don't need a quick quote to get you through. You don't need to bar yourself from engaging the grief to pretend like grief is somehow going to go away. In fact, I would suggest that banning grief is not even biblical, nor is it spiritual. But I get it. There's a theme that is out there, a myth maybe that you've heard, that God just simply wants us to walk around with a smile on our face all the time saying, praise the Lord, right? Like, too blessed to be stressed, right? Like whatever our little thing is that we want to say, we just think that that's God's expectation for us. Can I help you to understand something today? Nowhere in the Bible does it say that that's what God expects of us. God doesn't expect us to gloss over our pain, to gloss over our hurt, or to just gloss over our losses. Instead, God, he invites us to engage with those losses. That's why Jesus would say in Matthew 5:4 that God blesses those who mourn. And those who mourn, guess what? They will be comforted. Now, I love going to scripture, and Susette, you and I talk about this. John 11, right, is one of those scenarios, those scenes that John paints. It's interesting to me, John, he does something fascinating. He talks about the life of Jesus, and he talks about Jesus and what Jesus does, so we get a sense of his character. And I think people forget sometimes that if you want an image of what God is like, you look at Jesus.
That's right.
That Jesus is the image of the invisible God. That's right. And so John begins to paint this picture of Jesus losing a close friend, right? Mary and Martha, who are also close friends of Jesus, they're overwhelmed with emotion. They're grieving. And if you don't know the story, right? Jesus' friend has died. Jesus could have been there earlier. He chooses not to show up earlier. We've talked about this scripture before. But when Jesus shows up, people are frustrated with Jesus. They can't believe that Jesus took so long to get there. And Jesus sees them overwhelmed. And listen to what happens in John 11:33-35. When Jesus got there and he saw her weeping, right? He saw these women weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping. Understand this about Jesus. He was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. Jesus, being fully aware of the moment, being fully aware of what's going on, he is deeply moved. He's feeling the emotion. He's feeling the weight of everything that's going on. And then John continues his story, and he says that Jesus says, "Where have you laid him?" They say, "Come and see, Lord." And you know what Jesus' response is in the moment? Being fully present, being fully overwhelmed, being fully emotional, engaging with them, says that Jesus wept. Jesus began to cry. Now, this wasn't that Jesus had the sniffles. It wasn't that Jesus' eyes got watery, right? If you actually research this idea of weeping, this was Jesus cried out. That Jesus, he absolutely lost it in this moment. That Jesus was so present in the moment that he didn't deny it, he didn't avoid it, he didn't walk away from it. Instead, he engaged them in it, and he grieved with them.
Yeah, the scripture I read today, the translation I read, it said that Jesus burst into tears. It's like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Can you go back to the beginning of 33?
Yep.
I just want to say something. What's interesting, when I read through John 11 this morning, it says, when Jesus saw her weeping, he's talking about Mary, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was moved in spirit and troubled. Moved in spirit means anxious. He was worried, disturbed, and troubled, right?
Yes.
And then he burst into tears. So there was this deep compassion that he felt, even though he knew he did it on purpose. He waited to not heal Lazarus and let him die, and knew that he would go raise him from the grave. he still, as soon as he got around the people that were grieving, he started to grieve.
Yeah.
He has a deep compassion, even though he knows the pain, he knows what did happen, and he knows what will happen. In the moment, he has a deep compassion for those that he loves.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It's so great. It's so and so this deep compassion. See, sometimes I think where we end up in things is that we are taught that emotion and that sadness and grief, well, that equals weakness.
Yes.
Right? It somehow equals that you're weak. And people tend to say, well, come on, get yourself together. Come on, just suck it up. Come on, you're tough. You're going to get through this. But you know what I love about Jesus? Jesus is God, right? Like he's God of the universe. He's God. Nobody's accusing Jesus of being weak in this moment.
I hope not.
Yeah, we hope not, right? But the reality is that sadness and grief isn't weakness. It actually provides a strength. Jesus was strong enough to be able to be empathetic with what they were dealing with, being willing to come alongside them and comfort them in the moment. And I love this part. Grieves with them, right? Grieves with them in the moment. In other words, I think Jesus understood that for our life, for your life, that grief was and is a necessary part of emotional healing. It's something that we should choose to go through. But understand this, not everyone experiences grief the same way. Or you could say it this way, that everybody tends to grieve differently. And here's what you have to understand. There is no perfect way to grieve. There is no one-size-fits-all formula or model, right? And so we just want to kind of walk you through some expressions of grief that you may be familiar with. And again, I don't want you to deny these expressions, right? But I also want you to know there is no set timeline. This is not like step 1, step 2, right? There's no length of time in which these should last or shouldn't last, right? They're not linear, right? They're very organic. You may experience some of them. You might experience all of them. But I think it's coming to awareness of where are you potentially as you're experiencing what you're experiencing. And I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's helpful to look at these. And I know it's helpful for clients of mine and for myself as I go through grief to go, oh, that's what that is. That's grief. And you kind of put a grief stamp on it.
Yeah.
And then that helps you to understand what's happening inside of you instead of feeling out of control and confused.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So in expressions of grief, the first one that we want to talk about is this idea of shock, right? It's that the loss has occurred, right? There's confusion. Right, Suzette, you had thoughts on that as well. Walk us through what that experience is like.
So we can feel like physically and emotionally disoriented, not know what's going on like in time, or not even like feel kind of disconnected from our bodies and feel confused and feel disoriented in our life. So I think a lot of us feel that way during this time.
For sure.
With COVID, like we feel kind of confused, and I'll get in my car and go like, this is a normal road, but I haven't driven this road in 2 months, you know?
Right.
And so we feel disoriented and kind of disconnected from reality.
Can't even remember what day of the week it is.
That's right.
You know, so it's just like the whole thing is just a big shock. And then sometimes shock, whether we're processing that or not, or even feeling that, sometimes we also experience denial, right? Denial is an expression of grief where I think, like you said, a lot of people, even in this pandemic, I think are experiencing that, right? They can associate with this. It's almost like this isn't happening.
Yeah.
Right?
We forget that it happens sometimes, and then we'll become back aware of it. Like if someone passes away, we'll kind of feel like it's normal, and then it will hit us. Oh no, he's gone. You know? And so there's this denial and then this snap back into the reality of it that brings a lot of pain when we have those memories.
Yeah. And so as we're processing that denial, it seems to be hard to envision, or maybe there's even a disconnect with what the current reality has become, right? People are talking a lot about this idea of new normal, you know what I mean? And so it's hard to remember what was and then think of what's now, you know, or what is even going to come as we continue to move forward. And so that's where I think we begin to struggle sometimes, right? There's this real struggle moment, which is this variety of emotions, right? Which I think some of the thoughts that come up with this is like idea of why. Why is this happening? You know, why is this going on? And so you talked about it, and I think when we connected about it, it was just so, I don't know, felt very real to me when you're using the expression of hot emotion.
Yeah, I like I like to think of these like the hot emotions. So like there's intense sadness, and that involves a lot of crying and weeping and bursting into tears, as we said in scripture. The angry feelings, the fear of the future, just anywhere where we feel like an intense discomfort in our body that's like something's happening to me and I don't know what's happening. That can be sadness, anger, or fear. And so like the feelings feel overwhelming.
So the feelings are feeling overwhelming. You also talked about kind of this sharp jabs or stabs of pain that kind of keep coming up during those times, almost like it's like
real physical ones, right? Like you'll feel it in your gut, you'll feel it in your like chest, you'll feel it in your jaw, you'll feel like this intensity that happens no matter what the emotion is, but there's an intensity that's felt very physically.
And so that intensity very much feels like this struggle of all the emotions that we're feeling. Another expression that you can experience is this idea of depression, right? Or depression, where it just feels like it's hard to move forward.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you feel it in your body. It's a slowing, it's a fatigue. And instead of hot emotions, you talked about this idea of...
They're the cold ones.
They're the cold ones,
The cold, numb emotions. And a lot of depression does include this. We actually know, like when I'm meeting with clients that are severely depressed, and this isn't the severe clinical depression, but the depression that we feel. But when clients I know are severely depressed, their language, their speech actually slows down and starts to kind of numb out, like their tongue's too big. Right. You know, and you can tell that their brain is moving very slow. And so a lot of depression includes, like, again, like the disorientation, confusion, sluggishness. You have a hard time concentrating. A lot of people are saying during COVID that you can't read very well because you can't like focus on what's going on in the words and interpret and read well. Right. And then you're eating and sleeping. You kind of numb out by eating too much, not eating enough, sleeping too much, not sleeping too much.
Which is all very fascinating, right? And understanding like these expressions that we go through, these feelings that we have when we're experiencing loss, they affect us emotionally. They affect us mentally. They affect us physically. And ultimately, they affect us spiritually as well.
They just nail us in all ways.
Yeah, they're coming after us, right? Yep. So as we're understanding these expressions, we can get to a point as a part of these expressions where we understand surrender. Right? That's one of the ways that we choose to express, or another way you can say that is we get to a place of acceptance in the loss. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what that looks like?
So really, like, as these different emotions are jabbing at us or numbing us out, right? We feel the anger, then we feel the sadness, then we feel the numb, and it moves throughout the day or moves throughout different days. There will come a time, depending on what the loss is, where we begin to accept that this is true. And our goal, often, I think naturally, we don't accept that it's true with hope, right? So we might accept that the loss has occurred, but what will the future hold? Sure. What does the new normal feel like?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And we get to this point where we're gonna lean in and we're gonna try to let it go. We're gonna kind of come to terms with things at some point, even though there is this new normal that we don't really know how that's gonna go. But we arrive at a point where we have enough comfort to begin to cope with the grief that we have in that moment. Here's what I know. Maybe today you're listening to this and you can identify on these expressions. Maybe you're feeling one or the other, or maybe multiple ones in this current season, and it feels heavy. It feels overwhelming. It's difficult. I understand that it must feel that way. But I want to also take an opportunity to encourage you as we're processing this. I want to encourage you with a passage of scripture that I think you may be familiar with. It's found in Psalms. In fact, I would encourage anyone, if you want to just spend some time reading and you want to kind of process emotion and kind of also reflect on God and who He is, process with the Psalms, right? Read through the Psalms. The Psalms are great emotional expressions. They're great reminders of who God is. And one of those is Psalms 23. And I want to pull out one verse in particular that I think just kind of clarifies what we're talking about today. It's found in Psalms 23, verse 4. And David, who authored this psalm, he says that even though I walk through the darkest valley, okay? Now just pause for a second, okay? I need you to understand what's going on. He says, even though I go through it, okay? You know, it reminds me, I don't know why I keep getting this like whatever nursery rhyme in my head. It's like over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house we go, right? You know what I mean? It's like something about grandma's house, right? Is exciting. You know, we want to be at grandma's house, but you have to go through some things to get to something else, to get to some better things. David is saying, I recognize that as I go through life and when life doesn't play fair and when we're experiencing losses, he says that I'm going to go through it. I can't get around it. I can't go over it. I can't get under it. I can't kind of skirt on the side of it and hope that I can just avoid it. He says, I'm going to go through this, right? Because I'm not going to avoid it. I'm going to face it head on. He says, but when I go through the darkest valley, he says, I'm going to fear no evil. Right? I'm going to fear no evil. And I love that because we said sometimes you're faced with a choice. Do you lean into the grief or do you shrink back in fear? David says, what I've learned about God is I don't have to shrink back in the fear. I can actually lean in to the grief. In other words, I can walk through the grief, but I don't have to be paralyzed by fear. Right? I'm not going to allow fear to keep me locked into something that's unhealthy for me. I'm going to continue to process. And I think that's where some of us might be today. We're fearful of leaning in because we're fearful about what we've lost. We're fearful about what that means for us in the future. We're of the thought of, I don't know what I'm going to do now, or where do we go from here? Or it's just this fear of the unknown moving forward. Again, fear paralyzes, but grief leads towards freedom, where we find Jesus in that moment. He says, I don't have to fear, for you are with me. You're with me in it. We talked about that. Like Jesus displays that. John 11, he's with you in it. And he says, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now, I don't know much about sheep herding, and I don't know a lot about, I've never raised sheep of my own. You know what I mean? But the reality is like shepherds, they have this rod and staff, and it's there for a reason. And I guess the staff is the kind of this direction. It's kind of like this correcting, right? Sometimes I feel like the rod is kind of like this prodding and poking, helping us get through, even some of the difficult things. And sometimes that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel nice. But I love that David not only says that I can trust that God is with me, but I can trust that God has the tools necessary to walk through this with me. That he'll continue to lead me as I continue to surrender, as I continue to leave it in his hands. Again, we are responsible for how we're going to respond in this moment. So let me ask you a question today. What are you avoiding in this season? What are you not willing to grieve? What maybe has fear held you back from in choosing to move forward with Jesus? Again, if you don't grieve your losses, then you tend to stay stuck in the loss. Right? Grieving is a part of the way that you and we stay healthy. So in our next few moments together, I just want to kind of process together this idea of engaging the process of good grief. So that a lot of what happens in our life seems to just naturally happen, right? I guess you could work really hard on your job, you know what I'm saying? But if your job lays you off, it just kind of happens. There's nothing you can do about it. So life in a lot of ways happens. But the difference with grief, right? Instead of it just happening, grief is something that you can choose to enter into. That's right. That you can choose to begin to process. And so how do we begin to process that well? And you talked about much of this begins with a certain integration.
Yeah, this process, good grieving, means that we are integrating and remembering God's love, his presence, and the truth about his goodness into thoughts that are painful. Mm-hmm. So we're able to acknowledge the thoughts and express them to him, and we remember in the moment that he comforts us. Right. This is where we bring in his truth of his love.
Right. I love that.
And bring it in every day and all throughout the day.
Yeah, bringing in that truth. It's so critical. It's so important in our relationship with God. And so as we begin to engage this process, here's a first step that I think we would like you to consider. And the first is that we stop to reflect and process the loss. Sometimes when loss happens, again, we just want to get through it. We just want to fast forward. We just want to feel good again. You know what I mean? We don't like to process it. Here's what I'm encouraging is to slow down and name what you've lost.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And process is an experience that's different for everybody, depending on kind of your personality and the way you're wired. So some people need to process just in writing or on their own, mm-hmm. or they process while they walk and they don't even say words. Some people process in their head. Some people process out loud. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important if you're processing in relationship, both to practice processing in prayer, but also process with people that mm-hmm. aren't afraid of your pain. who don't minimize it, who don't ignore your pain, and who don't shame you for feeling it.
Right.
No matter how spiritual it sounds. Basically, people that don't tell you to suck it up.
Right.
Whether they tell you to suck it up with Bible verse or not.
Right. So good. Yeah. And I think too, when we're talking about this idea of identifying the loss and reflecting and processing it, we really want to get to identification, because here's what I know. Chances are it wasn't what you're feeling is not just the loss of losing your job. There's something deeper than that, right? So in other words, it gets down to the harder question of like, hey, what did you actually lose? So in other words, you look back on your childhood when dad left, or when mom left, or when the family broke apart. What did you lose in that moment? What was actually going on? What did you lose that you never really processed? Could you begin reflecting on that? When you did lose your job, chances are it wasn't that you just lost your job. Maybe that really dealt with much more of security, a certain dream, friendships that you had there at your job, right? A certain form of financial stability that you were really holding on to. And sometimes the losses that we experience, they just have a lot more to do with like our pride and dignity. Like maybe our identity itself has taken some bruises and taken some hits. And we really want to be able to examine that, because here's the reality. What you don't identify, you'll continue to be provoked by. That you want to process that. But the good news is when you process that, you find God, again, to be present. Psalms 34:18, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, to those who are willing to sit in and process, to sit in and begin to think through, to identify it. And here's what happens. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed. God doesn't only come alongside. God doesn't only walk through with you. God rescues. God is a rescuer. And that's something so significant for you to understand. God in his patience with us, sits with us, walks with us, is willing to rescue us. The second thing that we want you to consider is you need to begin to feel what you're feeling and express what you're feeling. Feel what you're feeling and express what you're feeling. Suzette, talk to us more about that.
So you experience it, right? You know that it's coming up inside of you, and you learn to express it out loud in a way that's heard and caught. And that's the process of lamenting, right? And throughout the Psalms and in the Hebrew scriptures, in Lamentations and even Ecclesiastes, people are expressing their anger and their sadness and their fear before God, and knowing that God hears them. And sometimes they remember that he brings comfort, and sometimes they don't say anything about that. But they know they're saying it out loud to him because it's all prayerful.
Yeah.
You know? So it's important, I think, that we learn our own weird rhythm, our own weird pattern of expressing our feelings. We know that we're going to get angry jabs of pain when we hear certain songs or when we drive down a certain street, and being aware of that is okay. Letting it happen and then telling someone about it is okay, even though it's going to feel weird when you say what your weird stuff is out loud, because we're all very unique and weird. Right. Yeah, can we give the definition of lament?
Yeah, absolutely.
You have a beautiful one.
So lament is an interesting word. It's not a word that we use every day. It's not something that we tend to say. Some of you, it's new to you, or maybe you've heard a reference of it. But this idea of lament is a passionate expression of grief to God, an act of worship that can include, listen to this, complaining to God and or acknowledging uncomfortable emotions like sadness, fear, and anger in prayer before God, without trying to pretend you're happy.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean,
and we talked about hot emotions, right? And so I think it's important to practice. This takes skill for me, because I was raised to kind of suppress these. But for me, it became a skill to learn to express the emotion as hot as it is without waiting for it to calm down before I pray. Right. So I don't talk to God about how angry I was this morning, but I learn in the morning when I'm angry to tell him I'm very angry right now, you know? And even I had moments in the past year where I began to feel only angry during a worship song. Austin knows what song it is. I've already talked to him about it. But I would feel angry, and I was grieving. I was lamenting something in the midst of one specific worship song. And I felt really guilty because I'm not supposed to feel that way. But at some point I gave myself permission. I realized I was actually worshiping, even though I was presenting anger before him and not gratitude or happiness or contentment. I was presenting anger before him. I felt Very weird.
And I think it's so important that people realize that, like, again, it's an act of worship. Like, many aren't taught that, right? You're taught to suppress it, or that's not the way you approach God. But God, again, he's inviting us to engage with him in that way. One person throughout scripture that engaged with God that way is, he's got a funky name. And if you don't like your name, be glad your name's not Habakkuk, okay? But Habakkuk, right, when he writes, he actually writes out his prayers. It's this prayer, and he listens for God's response. He prays, he listens for God's response. And it's a fascinating interaction. He says, how long, Lord, must I call for help, but you don't listen, right? Or cry out to you, violence, but you don't save. Why do you make me look at injustice, and why do you tolerate wrongdoing? He says, destruction and violence are before me, and there is strife and conflict abounds. He says, therefore, the law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails, and the wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted.
Wow.
Right? When's the last time you talked to God like that? Right?
Not just that, but in the Hebrew scriptures, God talks about justice and bringing justice as part of his identity. So Habakkuk is telling him, you say you're this way, but you're not.
Exactly.
That makes my stomach hurt.
Yeah. I mean, it feels intense, right?
So intense.
To have to approach God in that way.
Yep.
But I love what Habakkuk does. He continues to respond to God. God meets him in that moment. God gives him a response. He receives it. He continues to cry out to God. But as he cries out to God, God continues to love him, continues to comfort him, continues to walk beside him. And by the time we get to chapter 3, Habakkuk's attitude has changed. His response to God has absolutely changed. And what we learn is that through his prayer of lament, right? Through this way of worshiping God, God actually changes his heart through the process. Now, why that's important is that God changes his heart and his attitude through the process, although God didn't immediately change his situation. He was still experiencing the struggle. He was still experiencing what he was so frustrated about, but he had a newfound reality of God's presence, of God's love, of God's care. And get this, God's bigger plan that you and we actually can't see, that we actually can't fathom, that we actually can't really kind of get our minds around sometimes, but it's this understanding that God, he's still in control. And when we arrive at that point where we're willing to share our true feelings and our true thoughts with God, then I think we arrive at this point where we begin to invite God to bring healing to the hurt, inviting God to bring healing to the hurt. Now, Susette, you talked about these ideas of expressions of pain, and the more we lean into them, that there comes a time where we begin to allow God to speak to us through them. Share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think at first our voice, our pain is very loud, and hopefully we have a memory or an awareness that he is there present with us and listening, even if he's silent, right? And sometimes he brings us comfort, but when the hurt's really intense, we don't always feel that. So we're giving it to him, giving it to him, giving it to him. And we're acknowledging that it's grief, right? So we know that it's for good and for a process. And then at some point, like you just mentioned, he cools down those hot emotions and brings them to a place, not of numbness, not of the cold emotions, but he brings them to kind of grounds them into a perfect temperature, like porridge with the three bears and Goldilocks. But brings it to a place where we feel settled again, not accepting that everything's okay necessarily, but accepting that he is good and that he loves us. And so he shows us first that he's near us when we're brokenhearted, that he weeps with us, that he bursts into tears with us, right? Yeah. And then he reveals truth to us. And then with that, he begins to re-earn trust that was lost, whether he should have lost it or not. We begin to trust him again. And that's where surrender comes in. Yeah. Because we go, no, he is a God that is good, that created me. He is the creator of the universe, that wants good for me, that loves me, that wants me to heal, that wants me to be content, that has a purpose for me. And then from there, we move into a place where we trust him even more deeply, despite our circumstances. That's where real hope comes in.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so good. And I love how you mentioned that we talked about he's close to the brokenhearted, but Psalms 147:3 also says that he heals the brokenhearted. So God is a God who is with us. He walks alongside us. He goes through things with us. He's a God who's willing to comfort us and lead us. He's patient with us, but he's also a God who not just rescues us, but he's willing to heal us. He's willing to restore us, the brokenhearted. He binds up their wounds. And I think that's what it feels like a lot of times, like when we're going through loss, is like it just feels like we're so wounded.
Yeah, we're open.
Yeah, and it hurts so bad. We're bruised, right? But we understand that time doesn't heal all wounds, right? God does. God, he heals all wounds, right? That God, he's willing to heal us. Why? Because there's no hurt that we can experience that Jesus hasn't already experienced. And because he can empathize with us, he can be there for us in it, he's also willing to deliver us from it. But I think a key important thing that we miss sometimes is God can't heal the things that we continue to hide or avoid. Instead, God invites us, right? He invites us to engage. That if we admit our losses, right, then we could be free to now grieve. And as we're free to grieve, we can invite him to walk in this with us. And it creates this space for him to enter our grief and to begin to provide the healing that we so desperately need. Now, in our last few moments together today, I just want to encourage you to know that God is there with you right now. God is with you in whatever it is that you're experiencing, the loss that you're dealing with, and whatever it is that you feel inside. God, he knows and he understands. The question is what would you do if you truly knew that he was there? And my hope for you today is that you would choose to lean in, that you would choose to accept his invitation. In fact, I want to encourage you with this scripture. It's found in the book of Lamentations. Susette talked about Lamentations earlier, where we get the word lament. It's interesting. Lamentation is penned by Jeremiah, who is known as the weeper, right? Like the crying prophet, right? And so he writes the book of Lamentations, and he gives us a great picture of everything that we've been talking about today. And I really want you to hang on to this if you don't get anything else out of this, because this is where we're really going to need to land to make a firm commitment as we take next steps forward together today. He goes on and he says this. He says, "The thought of my suffering and my homelessness is bitter beyond words." So he's praying, he's crying out to God. He's saying, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I'm going through. I mean, it's unbearable. He says, I'm never going to forget this awful time as I grieve over my loss. I'm never going to forget this moment. We're never going to forget COVID-19. It'll be written down in history books. You'll be telling your kids about it. Whatever losses you've experienced in this season, you're never going to forget those as we begin to grieve over this loss. And I think that's so important for us to understand that you will get through it. You'll begin to process it. It doesn't mean that you will easily, completely get over it. You'll remember it, but you will get stronger as you begin to engage with it. And I love this idea of never forgetting this loss, because he follows it up with this. Yet I still dare to hope when I remember this. The faithful love of the Lord never ends, and his mercies never cease. Now, Susette, I know for you, verse 20 just kind of sticks out, right?
The whole thing.
The whole thing, right? The whole thing sticks out.
The transition for me sticks out. So the transition from verse 20 to 21, where it says, I won't forget this awful time as I grieve over my loss. That feels very hopeless. And then he shifts and says, yet I still dare to hope.
Yeah.
And so their hope becomes a decision, a behavior, an act that we do in moments where we feel hopeless. And we need to know what to hope in. So we need to know who our God is and who Jesus is. We need to know why he's going to bring about healing and change. But the fact that we can decide and shift into hope.
Yeah.
It begins to change how we think, how we feel. It begins to change us.
Yeah.
So we're allowed to sit in the pain, and yet we choose to shift into hope.
I love it too, because I mean, when you see this in his writing, right, as he shifts into hope, as he chooses to dare to hope, he begins to reflect on the goodness of God, God's love. And then he says this, great is his faithfulness. His mercies begin afresh each morning. Like God don't have stale mercies, right? God doesn't have old, stuff. God is refreshing every single day. Yeah. It's continuous. It's ongoing. Great is his faithfulness. And he says, so I say to myself, the Lord is my inheritance. Therefore, I will hope in him. Here's our prayer for you today, is that you would dare to hope. Is that you would dare to hope. And I know things are difficult in the moment, and I know that you're experiencing a wide variety of emotions in the moment, but understand this, you're not alone. We're here to help. We're here to help. And one of the ways we're going to come alongside and help is that we're going to offer a brand new workshop. We've never offered it before. Susette is going to be leading it. I want to give you that information. It's a workshop on loss and hope. A workshop on loss and hope. It's going to be 6 weeks with Susette Magaña. It begins Wednesday, May 27th, 2020. If you want more info or you want to sign up today, you want to be a part of this workshop, you want to begin processing the grief, you want to begin leaning in, you want to begin to dare to hope with us, I invite you to email us at info@citylineonline.org. Again, info@citylineonline.org. Susette, it's been awesome having you with us.
Yes,
so fun to always be able to teach with you.
Yes, me too. Thank you, Pastor Jack.
Yeah, appreciate your insight. And as we kind of close our time together today, wherever you're at right now, I just want you to quiet yourself, because I just want to spend a moment just praying over you that might be grieving today, or maybe are just experiencing loss, or even for those that maybe have tried to stuff the loss. And I want to spend time just praying, asking God to be with you, because understand this, God might seem silent, but he's not absent. It might seem like you're going through this all alone, but I hope that you'll be encouraged today to know that you're not alone. God is with you. You have a community of faith that's coming alongside you. But what you need right now in this moment is some encouragement, some peace. You need the presence of God with you in this moment. So right where you're at, if you can just kind of quiet yourself, quiet things down, just join me in this time of prayer. Heavenly Father, we come to you in this moment. And God, we just thank you that you're a good God. We thank you that you're with us right now in this moment as we cry out to you. Father, I thank you that you're the kind of God that invites us to engage the pain, to engage the loss, and Lord, to find you in the grief. You're a God who comes alongside, a God who walks with us, a God who does not give up on us, a God who navigates us through. You're a God who rescues. You're a God who heals the wounds that we are all experiencing. So Father, right now, God, for all those that are seeking you in this moment, that are hearing this prayer right now, wherever they may find themselves, whatever they may be thinking, God, I just pray that your tangible presence, Lord God, would be with them in their room, be with them in their home, be with them in their bedroom, wherever they are right now, God, I just pray that they would experience your hand upon them. Lord, better yet, I pray that they would experience, Lord, you holding them tight in your arms, God, as you continue to love on them. Lord, that they would be reminded of your faithfulness, that they would be reminded of your love that is unfailing, that is never ending. God, I pray, Lord, that your peace would be upon them. God, your peace is the kind of peace that goes beyond our human and earthly understanding. And Father, it's a peace that can guard our mind, it can guard our heart. And so, Lord, I pray, God, that you would set a guard in our heart, a guard in our mind. God, I pray, God, that we would be able to breathe in your presence, God, and experience, Lord, your hope as we dare to hope, as we dare to place our faith in you, as we dare to engage. And so, Father, right now, I pray for comfort. I pray for grace. I pray for mercy to overflow. And Father, we give you praise for what you're going to do in and through our lives. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.
Church, I just want to encourage you as we just respond to time of worship. If you feel like you're grieving just some losses, maybe you feel like you're in the waiting, you got to know that God is with you in that season. Let's worship together.
Can't go back to the beginning. Can't control what tomorrow will bring. But I know here in the middle is the place where you promised to be. I'm not enough unless you come. As I walk now through the valley, let your love rise above every fear. Like the sun shading the shadow, in my weakness your glory appears. I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? I'm not enough. I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? Will you meet us here? 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 And not for a minute was I forsaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. Come, Holy Spirit, dry bones awaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. 'Cause not for a minute was I forsaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this place. Come, Holy Spirit, dry bones awaken. The Lord is in this place. The Lord is in this I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want, 'cause all I want is all you are. Is all you are. Will you meet me here again? I'm not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again?
Heavenly Father, as we're just in this moment of worship, as people right now feeling broken, feeling hopeless, feeling in the waiting right now, but God, I pray that they'll choose to draw close to you right now, knowing that only you complete us. You are right there with us in our grief, in the loss, in the frustration, in the worry, all of it. You are right there with us, God. And we can be real with you, God. So I pray, Lord, that we can just open ourselves to more of you, be real with those emotions, what we're feeling. Just draw closer into your peace that passes all understanding. I just pray that you being the God of all comfort can just comfort those right now just feeling broken, feeling lost. We love you so much, Lord. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.
What's up, Cityline? Just want to let you guys know that there is still time to join the 5-day film challenge. That's right, the deadline to submit your team is tomorrow, Monday, May 18th. And if you want to learn more information about it, just go to citylineonline.org, scroll to the bottom of our homepage, and just click on the link. That's right, and you'll find out everything that you need to know, how to submit, some tips and tricks, and everything else. So we look forward to seeing your show as part of the show.
Hey Cityline friends and family, I want to tell you about something cool that we have going on every Sunday at 1 o'clock. Now we understand that connecting can be a little bit tricky during this particular time, so we've created a virtual lobby. Now joining this virtual lobby will give you the opportunity to not only connect with other Cityliners, but also meet some of the pastor team and other people in leadership. So this is awesome. We'd love for you to hang out and connect with us. If you're interested in doing that, you can go to the streaming on Facebook or on the app, and in the comment sections, you can click on the link and it'll provide a way for you to attend that meeting. You're not going to want to miss it, and we'd love to see you there.
Thank you so much for celebrating with us today. In order to stay connected, connect with us with one of our Connect groups, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, and you can even download the Cityline app. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.